Hi, Joel Rollins here for Rave Radio on day 2 of ISE 2015, and I'm sitting here with Paul Depperschmidt of Cisco. Full disclosure here, Paul and I have been co-teachers at Infocom and colleagues for a very, very long time. Paul, thanks for being with us.
Thanks. We both had pet dinosaurs, I remember, so we've been around this for quite a while.
Paul, you were telling me earlier about the role that you've taken on with Cisco. I mean, goodness knows that you've had some interesting roles in the audiovisual industry. Tell us what you're doing now.
Somewhat the same, somewhat different. Where I'm working right now is in our Collaboration Technology Group. So everything that you see in the booth here is created by the Collaboration Technology Group, the video conferencing phone systems, all of the architecture that runs underneath it, our cloud systems. And we build it. My job as business development is to kind of take the story out to the field and make sure that that story gets out. So it's kind of not a whole lot different than what I've done in the past, but then again, a lot different. So.
You and I have had a lot of talks about collaboration technology and where it's taking the meeting industry. Interestingly enough, as I look around, I see products developing that you've been talking about for a couple of years. So it's got to be a satisfying role for you.
It is, yeah. And I think actually the one thing for me, and it's one of the areas that I cover now, is the idea of truly doing unified communications, which we've been talking about since I can remember, 10, 15 years, about tying all the technology together. So your instant message, your present, your mobile, your video, your phone systems, all of that on the cloud, in-premise, doesn't really matter. Tying it all together has been our holy grail. This is where we've been going forever and ever, and I can truly say that we can actually provide a system from ground up with everything that you need today, which we couldn't do even 6 months ago, really say the full thing. Now I can say we can deploy the whole thing.
When we talked last year at this show, you had talked about that. You've also been working on programs to qualify dealers on collaboration. Tell us about that.
That one actually has kind of spun off. So when we started, the idea was, especially for the AV integrators, was to try to give them something they could latch on to say, I am really good at what I do because I do these things. It wasn't as much get a couple of people certified. It was more about how you do your work every day. So every project that you do follows certain types of parameters and certain types of things. Infocom, for instance, I was working on the standard there for now you've caught me and I've forgotten the exact name for it, but it's essentially a kind of a list of items that everybody should do on every job. Okay, you go pick out the things that apply, and then those are the things you check at the end of the job. And they apply to standards in that you say that there are certain parameters to hit. Okay, we don't necessarily determine those parameters, but it's important that you go check them. And so I was kind of involved in that very early on, and at Cisco we were giving them some things they could hang on to. Now it's more AQAV, and the guys at Infocom really have kind of taken that and run with it. And I think it's something every integrator ought to really look at, is how can I differentiate myself from just anyone that puts out a sign? This shows I'm really good at what I do. Every job, not just with this guy. Okay.
Now, one of my concerns when we started developing standards was you and I work in the fastest developing part of the industry. I mean, as you said, things that weren't possible 6 months ago now are. Can an association really keep up with standards on those things? I mean, because by the time we publish something, don't you have a new one?
Yeah, and that's something we wrestled with on the groups that were doing the standards, was how do we come up with something, number one, that was universal worldwide. So we actually it was the first time the groups really came together from all parts of the globe. And we found little things that we said, oh, I didn't know that. Well, they do it differently in Asia than they do it in the U.S. They call it something different. So we tried to kind of put the parameters into it where it would be kind of evergreen, where it's constantly going to change, it's constantly going to add. But some things, let's face it, these are the same parameters that we're using 20 years ago. Okay, some of them don't change that much. I mean, audio is still audio. Video and visual displays are still the same. And so there's a lot of things that will stay, and then you kind of add things on, like you see. Okay, how do I add those kinds of things in? So we tried to make it flexible enough to where you could add those things in.
So in other words, you can't have a standard for what you're installing, but you can have a standard for the way that you install it.
And that's exactly it. And we didn't try to say this is the only way to do it. We said that these are the parameters to check once you have. And so we couldn't come out and say this is the way that everyone's going to do their projects. So we were very careful in not saying that and say you have to apply the parameters and some of the metrics that are going to be checked. But we'll give you the structure and what needs to be checked, and then you do it.
What's exciting here at the show?
Well, of course, when you walk through this, I just introduced someone who'd never been here before, and to see through their eyes what this is and what we come to get used to. When they see it for their own eyes, and they kind of walk in and see, of course, the displays. I mean, let's face it. I mean, you walk and see some of the 8K displays over there that are the cube walls and things that you think you could actually put your hand through it. I mean, it's that good. But it's also the little things, I think, that we see that a company just right over here that allows you to put content up and move it around with your iPad when you're doing a conference or thing. Little things like that. We're in a neat business, let's face it. I mean, we are not selling bricks. This is fun.
We have great toys. We really do. Now, the interesting thing is, though, oftentimes because you're on the inside, there's always the product that gets the market hype, and then there's the really exciting product that's hidden, that maybe doesn't have the publicity. What do you consider the most exciting new thing at Cisco here at the show?
For us, a couple of them are what you'd call virtual. There's something that we're using now called Project Squared. And this is something that really we don't even sell right now. It's more of a concept thing. But imagine if you put your instant message and your email, your ability to meet in a room virtually with all these people, and it's persistent. It would you can actually use it to get your work done. We've developed something like that that's going to go further and further. So that's one of them, is Project Squared. You're seeing things in the cloud that we're doing. So instead of saying, I have this system and it won't work, like say video-wise, with Webex, now we've made them all work together. And you can say, just meet me in this virtual room, and whatever you're calling in on, it works. But the two, I think, that really, as far as hard products that really jump out at me would be the one that maybe you can take a shot later, but the SX10, which is right up here. And mainly it's for its price and performance. We know things are going kind of downscale. You have to bring the prices down, but keep the quality up. So compared to somebody that might use a PC in a room in order to do the room space, this SX10 would do a small huddle room as a one-piece power over Ethernet. You're able to get all the high-definition video and everything. All you do is supply the display, and it's ready to go. Price-wise, it's like $39.95 retail U.S.
So I'm well familiar with SX20. I've put quite a lot of them in. So is SX10 kind of SX20 Junior?
Yes, exactly. And the idea there is you're not going to look at doing a custom room with this. Right. You're going to look at deploying 100 huddle rooms with this, which is frankly spaces that we've never touched before. No one has. I mean, because the price performance just wasn't there. And we estimate like only 7% of the rooms, conference rooms out there in the world have any kind of technology in them. So we're all looking to how can we bust this loose. To the AV integrators, I would say one of the things that they have to consider is everything can't be custom. Okay, so there's times when you have to figure out how to scale these types of things, but don't look at them as the enemy. This is something that's an and, not an or.
Absolutely. I mean, what's happened to us. I mean, I work in the New York area. Yeah. What's happened to us is that a couple of years ago we would have been putting conferencing into 50% of our rooms. Now it's 90%, right? And now it's not about conferencing, it's about collaboration. As you know, I'm a huge Webex fan. How do we integrate? Does SX10 integrate with it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's the nice part about it now, especially when you do things like CMR and these cloud-based things. I have a room right now that I could just say, here's where you find me. And you can call in on almost anything you want. And so the SX10 would call in, Webex would call in. It really wouldn't matter how you get there. That's the thing that we really are trying to get across here. I think it came across in the video conferencing industry that you had to do it with this big iron, the heavy iron, the expensive stuff. And
well, we like selling big iron.
There were the toys, right? I mean, that's what we really enjoyed selling that. But now I think it's just as important that, you see my iPad here, my iPhone, even to things like our DX70 and 80 that are essentially an Android on your desk, but they're also a video system. So the idea that you may be using different types of technology, even during the same day, that you'll say, I'll sit in front of a very expensive conference room, but then I'll be, out in the middle of Amsterdam walking around on a Webex call. I've done that, So
it's nice to see you here, simply because that the huddle room, the little room, has become so important to our market. And there have been some small companies that filled the gap. Vadio has been a big one with that. And as I look around Cisco, I see Cisco, even though you're the big player, are addressing that market too.
We are. Yeah, and I think, again, the SX10, the DX70s and 80s, so what would have cost you $10,000 on a desk is now in the 3,000 range, something like that. And this is, again, something that we have to do. Yesterday in the presentation I gave, it's important to note that the way that we used to come about video conferencing was a top-down strategy. So we were selling to the CEOs and the CIOs and hoping it would move all the way down. It didn't. It hit a wall. It really didn't go.
They often don't talk to their lower. I mean, it's great to do that, but
the costs weren't right. The ability to deploy wasn't right. We couldn't really deploy and scale. Now what you're finding is it's being driven from the bottom up. Okay, people that have their devices at home, and I can call my grandmother and my kids, and I can do video. And it's like, why can't I do this at work? That's what they expect. And so you're seeing it being driven from an entirely different direction, from the bottom up as opposed to the top down. And so we have to adapt. We have to change to make it work. So,
what about, one of the other things that's going on now, and if I put my dealer hat on, I'm excited to see, is, the whole clientless collaboration thing. HTML5 has become very, very important. Where are we going there?
Oh, you know what? You may catch me on some things that I'm not an expert on. So I think that's one that I probably would want to beg off and say I could get probably in trouble by going too far on that one. So, okay.
And you could probably get in trouble for saying things that are not yet here on the floor. I get that, yeah.
But we actually, one of the things that I am working on right now is our architecture is something that I think is not well known, even within Cisco in a lot of cases, of what we're capable of doing now, and for the prices that are frankly astounding. I actually did recently just kind of a workup where if you were to do, say, 100 phones and Call Manager and the applications with Call Manager, maybe a couple of SX10s, a few of these little video things, and a mobile client, Jabber, Webex, ability to mix video, all of these things together usually would have cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we're talking about systems now that you could probably end up purchasing for less than 100 with all of that. That's full collaboration, instant message and presence, BYOD, mobile, all that. That's possible now. So even the smallest companies can now deploy something that, frankly, even a few years ago, we would have marveled at.
So we've actually, the interesting thing for us is we talked about the fact that we've always sold top down, right? It's always been sell to the boardroom, and we hope it will spread downwards. And to some extent that worked, but we're actually finding that spreading it upwards works a whole lot better. And we've found, it's very, very easy to get the lower and mid-level management onto something like Webex, and then suddenly find ourselves equipping rooms.
Change during the day. You use the technology that you need at that time. And I think that's the important thing. You don't have to rush to the office to get in front of the video conferencing system. You join by your iPad or your iPhone or something until you get to the room, and then you transfer it right over. So what we have to do, and you know this, I think, we have to get out of the way. Okay, people have work to do. They have things that they want to do. There's the business outcomes that matter to them. We have to get out of the way as far as technology is concerned and just let them get their job done.
We had both a revealing and somewhat embarrassing experience the other day. We brought a client into our demo room, right? And their CIO was with them. We actually, had to have them brought in and all that. And we were, a demo room is very polished. And the CIO turns to me and says, "Can we see your internal conference room?" And I said, "Sure." He goes, "We want to see what you use." And of course, we're heavy on WebEx and interactive board. Our internal conference room is a collaboration room, while our demo room is a boardroom. And that was, it caused me to stand back quite a bit and think, okay, maybe I've made a strategic mistake here. But
using it. Right. And I think when you look at it, I'm a kind of poster child, I guess you'd say, for working wherever there's internet, I work. And so I work from my home. I have for 10 plus years. And the ability to go out, like I said, even out on Amsterdam in the middle of the night and be able to do a WebEx call while walking down the street. If you've got internet, you're working. And
last year, just before this show, I was part of a WebEx with Paul where he was collaborating from his car on his iPad.
I do remember that, and I wasn't driving. Thank you. I did have a driver, my wife, but that just shows you what you can do. And I think that's the thing that most people want to see, that I can just get my work done. Okay, let's get out of the way as far as technology is concerned. I think it's also important that what we're trying to do with our collaboration is make sure that everything interacts and all the different technologies interact, but also give you a single user interface that you learn. One of the things that drives us all crazy too is I have to learn this, and then I have to learn that, and then I have to learn that, and how all of these run. Wouldn't it be nice if we gave you kind of an interface that looked the same no matter what you were touching? And that's what we do.
One of the things that's also been interesting is we're seeing the CEO walking away from the boardroom because he can. I mean, at one point that technology was installed there, so he would be helicoptered to headquarters for a meeting. Now we find them doing it from home as the cost comes down. And then we have CIOs looking at us and saying, why do I have $500,000 parked in a room that's used once a week? So there's a lot developing, and interestingly enough, the numbers are increasing. But I think it's going to take a different business strategy for a dealer, because now it's going to be on how many can we equip as opposed to how much can we put in a room.
Well, I'd even put it to a lot of the AV integrators that we've been talking to. We try to point out to them that if you're stuck in the room, you're going to miss a lot of what's going on here. A lot of it is going to be outside. It's going to be mobile. It's going to be the instant messaging. It's going to be the Webex type things, and it's going to be in some cases phones. So if you're not involved in that, or you say that's not my business, someone else will be. And so as an AV integrator, you've got to kind of protect your turf. And you've got to look at it from much more of a holistic collaboration standpoint, or one day you're going to look up and you're going to lose that client. So, some of them I think are getting it. A lot of them are not. And I think that's not that you will go out of business because you're just doing room systems by any stretch. They'll still be there. But you kind of lose control of your destiny. And I think that's the key point, is if you really want to control your destiny, you've got to look out of that room, and you've got to find a way to connect all these things and be, kind of in charge of the architecture and helping your client understand where they can go, why they would go there, and how they do it.
Yeah, and frankly, if you lose control of the infrastructure, you've lost control of whether or not you get that next room.
That's exactly right, and I think that's where, again, the integrators, they're smart people. They're just not necessarily comfortable in that behind the wall type thing, and I think that's where we talked about AV-IT for ad nauseum for how long? Decades, and so it's no longer if it's coming. It's well past. It's here. So most, I think, the integrators I see are picking all that up. They get the IT part, but a lot of cases they're looking at it as I can check the lamp life of a projector across the network. And we've got to take it further than that and say, how do I run this traffic on that network? How do I help my customer figure out how to route all of this and how to get it done?
Someone asked me the other day, on this road that we're traveling, when do AV and IT actually merge? And I said, look behind you.
Too late. Yeah, that was come and gone, but it really is something that you look at the glass half full or half empty. It's a tremendous capability and a tremendous possibility for these integrators that are going to jump in and say, I want to do more. And it could be Cisco, it could be other companies' things, but just look outside of that room-based system and say, I've got to figure out how my customer is going to do this on a much larger scale, or I become kind of irrelevant,
Okay, one last question. As somebody with an extensive background as an AV dealer, for those of us who are here and have one day left of the show, what should we be looking hard at?
It depends. Again, if you're looking for collaboration or unified communications, what you don't see even within our booth sometimes is the story behind it. You see endpoints. And so a lot of times it's the flash and dazzle. If I were to suggest to anybody, it's at least in the unified communications, start to get deeper into it. Start to look at it from more of a holistic standpoint. But as far as this show's concerned, you can't go wrong with the displays. They're great. A lot of things going on with the control systems companies, audio-wise, Dante, all those types of things. It kind of depends on where you are, but there's everything to see here. Take the time.
Absolutely. Paul, thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Okay, always a pleasure. Okay.